I grew up in the suburbs in a house that now would cost about $600,000. I own a house of my own now, but my kids are growing up in the city. In 2019, we bought this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house for $165,000 in the main city in our area. Our payment was $1,150 in 2019. Our plan was that we would stay there for a couple years, and then once we start growing a family, then we would upgrade. But since I was self-employed, by the time that I was able to get approved for a house, the interest rates started going up. And it just seemed like too much of a risk to take on a larger house payment. So we hunkered down and we decided that we're just going to make the most out of what we have here. Now I'm helping somebody buy a house as their realtor. They have 2 kids the same age as my kids, and they don't want to overextend on a housing payment, so they're looking up to $200,000 for a house. That's pretty much the lowest possible bracket that you can be shopping in my area. And I can't imagine there's many other places in the country that are much lower than that. So they're going to end up in the city too, probably the same neighborhood that I live in. And a lot of people would not want to live in the area that I live in. It just has a reputation of being, that side of town. And everybody wants to live in the suburbs when they're raising a family. Nobody wants to raise a family in the city, if we're being honest. But I really stand by the decision that we made. And so far, my kids are, in a lot of ways, living a better life than I did whenever I grew up in the suburbs. So I want to share how I'm making the most of living in the city, raising a family in the city, starting with the main benefit of taking this path, which is being able to live with much less financial stress. People so easily overextend when they buy a house. If you want to get out of the, quote, bad areas, you need to pay about $325,000 to $400,000 around here. That's going to be a $2,700 to $3,000 a month payment, in my experience. If we decided to take on a payment like that 5 years ago so we could have more room to raise a family, right now we would be screwed. Or at a minimum, we would have to be very careful about what we spend our money on every day. And we would be under constant stress and pressure about finances, and any unexpected large expense would be a complete disaster. Putting yourself in that kind of position will erode your happiness. I expect that is one of the most common reasons that marriages fall apart, is the constant pressure of finances. How can you maintain a happy marriage and stay in a good headspace to raise your children if you're always under the pressure of not having enough money in the bank? Week after week, year after year, what does that do to you and your family? And by the way, I should mention this. Your payment will go up every year when you own a house. People expect that when they're buying a house instead of renting, one of the main benefits of that is that your expense for your housing is going to stay the same. But that's not true. The principal and the interest on the loan will be the same. But typically your monthly payment also includes the taxes and insurance, and both of those will typically go up each year. This year, my payment went up $58. I pay $300 more after 6 years in this house than I did when I bought it. So if you're taking on a housing payment that is tight right now, how is it going to be in 3 years if it's $100 more, $150 more? Keeping your expenses low allows you to not stress so much about enjoying yourself. I just made a video about how I spend too much money on food, but I'm very fortunate that I can take my kids to the fair, or we can go get dirty sodas or ice cream on a regular basis, and it doesn't sink us financially. And having extra money also allows you to do some of the other things that I like to do in order to make the most of living in the cities. One of the best features that you can have in a home when you're living in a less than desirable neighborhood or on a busy street is a privacy fence. I live a block away from a bus stop, and I'm close to an intersection of 2 busy roads. But when I'm in my backyard, I don't see any of that. Nobody sees me because I have a privacy fence. I don't have to worry about crazy people coming up to my yard and trying to talk to my kids or mess with my dogs. It allows you to have your own little private space. You can enjoy being outside with your family, and you don't have to feel like you have to shelter yourself inside to get away from the crazy city people. Another thing you should look for is just a house on a good street. You don't have to classify entire neighborhoods as good areas or bad areas. All you have to do is just find a couple blocks of decent neighbors, and that stops 90% of the stuff you might worry about when you're living in the city. My immediate neighbors are all homeowners, so they're always working on their yards. They have families. I don't have to worry about them. One of the best ways to judge your neighbors without meeting them is by looking at what their yard looks like. If you're out looking at houses and you're on a street where everybody has flowers planted, their yard is mowed, that's a really good sign. Usually people who are garbage don't put a lot of effort into their lawn. Another thing is, if you can figure out whether there's a lot of rentals or if it's mostly homeowners, that's going to give you a good idea of what kind of street you're living on. And one way to do this is to look up the tax records on the county website for that property. You can see the name of the owner. If it's an LLC, then most likely it's a rental. And rentals are fine most of the time, but the problem is that the residents can change year after year, so you're just rolling the dice every time somebody new moves in. When I first moved into my house, the neighbor was a rental property, and there were some tenants that moved in on year 3 who were kind of loud, but then the homeowners moved in after that, and since then it's been great. And one last thing I want to mention about finding the house itself is don't worry so much about finding a house with a ton of space. This is a big trap that people fall into all the time. I grew up in a massive house by comparison to what I live in now. It was 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, and that doesn't even count the basement, which was unfinished at the time. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, it's easy to think that you need that much space to house an entire family. But that's not true. I know people who live in 1,600 square foot houses with 4 beds and 2 baths, and they still think that they need to buy a bigger house to grow a family. I have 5 people in my family and 2 dogs, and our house is 800 square feet. It was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and then we converted our dining area into a small 3rd bedroom. So my house is literally, you walk in, there's maybe a 15-foot by 15-foot living room when you enter. There's 2 small bedrooms off to the left, 1 tiny bedroom in the far corner, a hallway, and a kitchen. There's no upstairs, and the basement is not something that can be used as living space. So my house is apartment-sized, basically. And we have me, my wife, my 14-year-old stepdaughter, my 2-year-old, my 4-month-old baby, and 2 huskies all living in a small house. And you know what? Everybody's happy. The kids have never complained about wanting a bigger house. And if my home was twice as big, I don't know what good that would do us. More room to watch TV in? More rooms to put our stuff in? You might be in a big house listening to this right now, and you're thinking, well, I live in a 3,000 square foot house, and we make use of every room. I can't imagine having less space in this. You don't need all that stuff. And there's less room for the kids to play inside, but that leads me to my next point. Having a small house is one reason that I think my kids are having a better childhood than I did, even though I lived in a giant McMansion. This is because since we don't have tons of space for all kinds of toys and play sets inside for my kids, instead my 2-year-old does whatever I'm doing. She loves going to the store. She loves unpacking groceries and telling me what we bought. She loves to help me cook. She cuts veggies, she peels shrimp, stirs the pot. She helps me work outside. Last year, she was out there with me as we built the garden. She helped me bring the bricks over. She had her own little shovel that she would use to dig around with me. This year, we built these sheet metal garden beds. I held the pieces together and she put the screws and the nuts in. And then we planted all kinds of veggies, and now every morning and evening we go out there and we check the gardens, and she's so excited every time she sees how they grow. And this is all to say that she's experiencing and learning things that I didn't have hands-on experience with when I was 2 years old. I didn't start cooking until much later in life because I had a massive house and all kinds of toys to play with. My kid is not sitting around bored all day wishing she had a massive playroom. She has a small trampoline on our deck. She has a swing outside. She has everything she needs, and she's so smart. And I believe that's because she's having fun learning all these different things, all these different life skills since the age of 1. If your house is too small, then go outside more. That's what the privacy fence is for. Find a nice place to sit outside, get a fire pit, get some chairs so that you can have your coffee outside in the morning. This year, me and my wife decided that we would buy little TV trays or something like that so we can start having meals outside more often. Get a grill. Bring your family outside as you grill. And also, just because you live in the city doesn't mean that you can't go to the suburbs and enjoy everything that's there. The suburb I grew up in is a 15-minute drive away, straight shot down the freeway. We do our shopping there, we walk the trails there, we go out to eat over in the suburbs. You can enjoy those amenities of the suburbs while living in the city. The one drawback of living where we do is that my wife can't just walk around our neighborhood alone. She would love to go on walks. That's just not an option. Anytime she starts to feel like it's safe enough to do that, she ends up seeing a crazy person walking down the boulevard, and it reaffirms to her that it's not a good idea. We go for walks as a family still, but she would never take the kids alone. The expectations for your house and yard are lower in the city. So that takes some pressure off as well. Our yard sucks, truthfully. I would love to have a nice yard, but because I have dogs, it just gets destroyed. They dig holes sometimes, and in the places where they walk and run most often, the grass just dies, and it's just dirt trails basically in my backyard, and nothing will grow there. I mow the lawn, and it looks all right if we keep it short, but it's largely just weeds, and there's a dandelion infestation. But the nice thing about living in the city is that I don't have to stress too much about that. If I lived in the suburbs in a nice neighborhood like what I grew up in, somebody would have reported me for ordinance violation a long time ago. I'd be getting fined by the city if I didn't mow for longer than 7 days. I spend a lot of time doing yard work and gardening, trying to make things look nice. I'm trying to add things to my yard to make it more enjoyable for my kids to spend time there. But if I'm busy and I can't mow one weekend, I don't have to stress out about it because the standards are low. No one's going to report me. Now, the one major issue that we are going to face in the future is the schools. If you're raising a family in the city, this is a real obstacle. There's no way I'm going to send my kids to the public schools around here. It's just not going to happen. So we have two options. Either we do a private school, which is going to be expensive, but all the people that I know who have sent their kids to private school have not regretted investing that extra money. So I do think that I would find it to be worth it. However, at this stage, not being quite at the school age with my kids yet, I would probably prefer to avoid that option. So what I'm thinking of doing is trying to find open enrollment for a better school district. My brother-in-law lives in the same city that I do, but he was able to put his kids in the school district that I grew up in. So that is possible. And I think the best way to overcome this obstacle is to plan for it early. Learn about your options well in advance. I think, for some of these more desirable school districts, the open enrollment might take a couple years to be able to get in. One of the major benefits of being in a good area is to be able to put your kids into a good school district. But if you can do open enrollment and get the benefit of living in that area without actually having to pay the premium and live there, that's a huge win. We've been able to make a good life for ourselves, even though we don't live in a desirable area. We don't stress about money. We have privacy. We cook, garden, play outside, and build equity in a home because we did not overextend ourselves. If you feel priced out of the nice areas, consider taking this route. If you're stuck raising a family in an apartment building, I promise it's going to be better for you to live in maybe an area that you didn't imagine living in than it is to stay trying to raise your family in an apartment building. If you're raising a family, you really should try to have land, your own home, your own space, so you don't have to worry about your apartment neighbors and how loud your kids are being. That's just a miserable existence. Hopefully this helps somebody. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and watch my other videos. Thank you.